Rickey. These are from the website www.baseball-almanac.com, quotes by Branch Rickey. I got a couple of short ones here. Baseball people, and that includes myself, are slow to change and accept new ideas. I remember that it took years to persuade them to put numbers on uniforms. And the second quote I'm going to quickly read is, ethnic prejudice has no place in sports, and baseball must recognize that truth if it is to maintain stature as a national game.
And you know, the thing about Rickey is that he was a man of his word. He was a devout Christian. Actually, was giving a speech in 1965 when he had a heart attack and actually collapsed on stage. But he was he's actually reading from the Bible. Very moral guy. Just really was against that. The interesting thing about Branch Rickey, he had been a player and failed. He was miserable. He'd been a manager and failed. He was miserable, and then he became a general manager and so forth, and had many inventions like the batting helmet and things like that. The farm system, he invented the farm system, but his biggest thing was the Jackie Robinson move. So the guy was way ahead of his times.
You know, I'm kind of fascinated with this character, and I see him a different type, but definitely another American hero. If you don't mind, I got one more quote I'm going to read, and this is a quote attributed to Jackie Robinson in I Never Had It Made, and where he stated that, I realize how much our relationship, and he's talking about Branch Rickey, I realize how much our relationship had deepened after I left baseball. It was that later relationship that made me feel almost as if I'd lost my own father. This is after Branch Rickey had died. Especially after I was no longer in the sports spotlight, he treated me like a son. Just an amazing guy.
Branch Rickey, and the two of them made something special.
Right time, right place, and right people.
Absolutely.
I think we need to talk somewhat about the Latin ball players.
We can talk about the Latin ball players, and that's an interesting thing there. The Latin ball players, they had the same type of discrimination. Their discrimination came from, and there had been some Latin ball players that had played. There had been some Hawaiian players that actually played Major League Baseball, and some American natives that were that broke into the major leagues. The deal with the Latin ball players was that if they had dark skin, they would be classified in the black situation, and if they were very light skinned, they probably got to play. And so you saw I think probably the most remarkable situation was probably with Roberto Clemente, and Clemente was a icon in Puerto Rico. Still is, in fact. But Roberto Clemente would be a fellow that would play winter ball, and he was more popular than the president down there. And when he came north to the major leagues, because Clemente was very dark, he was treated as a black, refused hotels, refused dining accommodations. Many times in department stores, I read an article one time where he was denied access to purchasing furniture. And he not only got that black part discrimination, but Clemente was interesting in the fact that he was also discriminated because he was Latino, okay? And the thing about him is he spoke broken English. You could understand it, but he wasn't fluent English, okay? And many of the writers at the time would make fun and actually quote him in the broken English and publish those type of things in the paper. And so it was, which makes that really ironic in that here is a fellow that speaks fluent Spanish and English, but yet the writer only speaks English and no Spanish. And so Clemente's actually got the leg up here, but he's the one getting discriminated against. And so he went through all of these things, and then when he would go back to his native Puerto Rico, he was considered a hero.
Sure.
And so that was, and a lot of the guys, a fellow just recently passed away, a fellow named Manny Minoso, went through a lot of that. And many of these guys, like Orlando Cepeda and stuff like that, they considered Minnie Minoso as their go-to guy because he was Hispanic as well as very dark skinned, and he was the first one to break in for the Chicago White Sox in 1951.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what, Rich? While we're talking about this, just mentioning that, I'd like to talk about the fellas here because even though there was only one Jackie Robinson, there were many Jackie Robinsons. And what do I mean by that? I mean that if you look at each one of these guys that broke in with each one of these teams, they were treated like Jackie Robinson. It just wasn't publicized as much. You know, they didn't get to go to the rooms. They didn't get to go to the restaurants. They had to stay in the black neighborhoods. They couldn't stay with the team and so forth. And many of our listening audience, their favorite team, they probably couldn't list the Jackie Robinson of their favorite team. And, of course, Jackie Robinson broke in with the Brooklyn Dodgers. But then if you're a Cleveland fan, in 1947, it would have been Larry Doby. If you were a St. Louis Browns fan back then, which is now the Orioles, your Jackie Robinson would have been Hank Thompson. Monty Irvin for the Giants in 1949. And Sam Jethro for the Boston Braves, which are now the Atlanta Braves after they went through Milwaukee. We mentioned Manny Minoso in 51 with the Sox. Bob Trice with the Philadelphia Athletics, who are now the Oakland Athletics. Ernie Banks was the first Chicago Cub black player, and that was September 17, 1953. Kurt Roberts of the Pirates in 1954. Tom Austin of the Cardinals. Now we're 7 years later, and the Cardinals finally have their first black ball player. Nino Escalera of the Cincinnati Reds in 1954, along with Chuck Harmon on that same day. Carlos Paula of the Washington Senators. Elston Howard was the first black Yankee, and that wasn't until 1955. And then we had John Kennedy with the Philadelphia Phillies in 1957, Ozzie Virgil of the Tigers in 1958, and then finally Pumpsie Green on July 21st of 1959. So whatever your favorite team is, if you're a big fan of that team, you may want to see who that Jackie Robinson was of the team, because keep in mind, they didn't stay with the team. They were segregated, just like Robinson and the things you see in the movies. Each one of these guys went through it, but it's not talked about as much.
I don't want us to run out of time. We have more topics here to cover regarding this issue, but I do want you to touch upon somewhat, and you have already a little bit, but once the teams became integrated, you know, things for the black players still didn't change that much. We talked about, you know, the teams would travel. They'd go to a major city. All the players would go to a hotel, except the black players. You know, that sort of thing. Let's touch upon that.
You know, and people don't realize that went on into the 60s. And one of the great examples is with Curt Flood and August Busch of the St. Louis Cardinals, and they were having a conversation. I believe it was during spring training, and Gussie Busch said, they were talking. Said, "Well, when we get back to the hotel, we'll finish this conversation." And Curt Flood of the Cardinals, who was an all-star, he was a great ball player. He looked at Gussie Busch in amazement and said, "Mr. Busch, the black players don't stay at the hotel with the white ball players. We stay in a separate area." And Busch didn't, and we're in the 60s now, and Busch did not realize that the team was actually, his own ball team was segregated like that. He immediately put an end to that, being the gentleman that he is, but you know, he was unaware of that, and so many people were unaware. And you got to keep in mind that, think about this, you're Willie Mays, you're Hank Aaron, Ernie Banks, maybe you're playing in the All-Star game, and 50,000 people are rooting for you, or you're playing in the World Series or something like that, or 50,000 people, because you're on the road, are rooting against you, okay? And so you're playing in front of this big audience. They're asking for your autographs and pictures with you and everything like that. And after the game's over, you go back to the black areas, and if a family puts you up in the black areas, or you go to a black hotel, and that's what these guys went through. They were stars, but yet were treated so much different than what the public was probably aware of.
There's a lot of subtle things that cause great change, and there was a process going through the 50s and 60s, and where suddenly you have white kids, and their heroes are black players.
And I was a product of that. Growing up in St. Louis, naturally, two things. One is, if you grow up in St. Louis, you don't have a choice. It's going to be Stan the Man Musial. It's going to be your hero. But he was at the end of his career when it entered the 60s. Actually retired in 63. And up all during the 50s, and about the same amount of time, every kid in America wanted to be Mickey Mantle. I don't care who you are, whether it was National League or American League. However, now we start to see a big changeover, because by this time, now Stan Musial's gone. That was my hero. Now who's my hero? Well, my heroes all of a sudden became Frank Robinson. They became Willie Mays. They became Hank Aaron. Yeah, Roberto Clemente. Yeah, they all became black ball players. Now, this wasn't going on in the American League because they were slow to integrate, but most of the stars, if you were in the American League, most of the stars and most of your heroes were not black ball players. They were the Harmon Killebrews. They were the Carl Yastrzemskis. They were Brooks Robinson. These were all the white guys, as opposed to the National League and the National League fan and the kids there. The white kids had heroes that were of course they had their local hero, but on a national basis, they were black ball players by and large.
We are rapidly running out of time. I got about a minute here. I want that you can spend on this next topic. What can you tell me about the Negro League Museum in Kansas City?
Oh, you know what, and to our listeners, if they are listening, if you want to find more about this and you are a baseball fan, you owe it to yourself, especially if you're traveling with your family down Interstate 70 this year, or going by Interstate 70 and going by Kansas City, you got to stop at the Negro Leagues Museum. It is a great trip, and you'll find out so much more about the Negro Leagues and all these guys that are, many of them are in the Hall of Fame, and guys that you hear about and so on and so forth. It's right next to the American Jazz Museum. It's right next door. They've got, but this is a trip that if you're a baseball fan and you want to be educated and know more about this, that is a must. And what a great time in the summer to stop by there. And actually, they actually sell some of the souvenirs with some of the old black teams, the Kansas City Monarchs, and I got a New York Black Yankees hat. It's a great trip. Okay.
I want the audience to know your book, The Beef, your award-winning book, Marble Award winner, and things changed for you a little bit. Where can the audience find your book?
Actually, if they would, they could go to eBay, or they can write me on my email, agent, AGENT, 64506 at yahoo.com. I'll advise them there, and actually I have a few copies I could personalize and send them out to them.
Okay. I want to repeat that, AGENT 64506 at yahoo.com. Agent 64506 at yahoo. And
I believe the soft copy is about $15 and the hard copy is about $23.
Okay. Your next book, Away We Go. I'm really looking forward to that. Hopefully that'll be published in the next, say, 2 to 3 months.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that. That's about baseball in the 50s with a lot of the backdrop we talked about here. But during this period of time, away we go. This is when all the teams left. Philadelphia went to Kansas City. The St. Louis Browns went out to Baltimore. The Boston team went to Milwaukee. So you see these teams moving all over the country, and then baseball itself was dominated by the Yankees, Dodgers, and during that period of time, along with the Milwaukee Braves. So it was a great time for baseball and a lot of movement going on.
Harry, we are out of time. I got to thank you so much for appearing on our show tonight.
Well, thanks for having me, Rich. It was a pleasure.
It's a pleasure for me, too. I need to tell the audience the rather famous and historic Take Me Out to the Ball Game song used in tonight's broadcast was provided by the Sounds of Baseball, created audiophile by baseball historian, fan, and enthusiast Steve Contursi of New York. As a way to say thank you to Steve and his hard work, we're providing links on our website so listeners can view his website. If you miss a show, you can always go to www.storytellerscampfire.org, and on the homepage we'll have a link that takes you directly to the archive shows. I want to thank our global audience for tuning in this evening. I also want to thank our sponsors who make our program